as gold has been, and the oil market has been able to react, at least internationally, to the situation. Jen?
Yes, absolutely. Well, we did see a really big spike early in the day in crude oil, sharply higher following those attacks in both New York and Washington. Now, trading in the New York Merc, the building near the World Trade Center, actually was suspended. But we know that early in the day, we saw crude prices climbing really to an 8-month high. We've got a spike there for light sweet, up 14 cents, so where it closed at 27.77. We'll also have to check many of these numbers, as we know trading was very, very brief. Now, analysts say the spike comes on a couple of concerns, but the main concern about production actually being disrupted in the Middle East. And some say that if an armed conflict were to take place on land here, that could actually look at sites on the Middle East and oil production and actual installations, and that being a main concern, that would disrupt production there. Now, how big and how great is production in the Middle East? It is very large. Analysts telling me just this morning, production in Saudi Arabia, 8 to 9 million barrels. Kuwait, over 2 million barrels. Iraq, over 2.5 million. Iran, about 3 million barrels. So they're telling me, particularly Stephen Smith over at Dane Rauscher on the phone just now, saying that if there were to be a disruption in the Middle East, it would affect the world's supply. Now, Smith actually thinks that prices would steady, however, once production may resume onto normal levels and once trading begins again on the Merc when we come back. Now, he's telling me that as long as oil production facilities are not affected, prices should begin to moderate and return to normal levels. That is what they're thinking. Smith is telling me that people are reacting to panic at this point in time, that they're spiking the prices up, but that they see production being steady and therefore prices dropping back down to more normal levels, possibly beginning next week. So that's a good thing, because economists are concerned, as well as oil traders, that if this spike remains high, this is certainly not good for the world economy, the soft economy in the U.S. or abroad. But they do see a softening in prices once people hear about the devastating damage, but they're saying it's to installations pretty much not being affected.
Right.
I mean,
that's where we stand now.
All right. We also, along these lines with oil prices, the NYMEX is saying that it delays the start of its after-hours access trade today. It has not canceled it yet, however. We are waiting further statements from them. As you can imagine, all of the exchanges today have been scrambling to try and really come up with their game plan. No U.S. stock trading today. The NYMEX, though, is going to give us a statement a little bit later about whether they will start their after-hours trading. It's not canceled yet, but it is delayed. Let's get an update now and kind of a recap of where things stand with Bonnie Barron, now our news editor. Bonnie?
Hi, Sue and Bill. We do have some information coming in. We're hearing now that 2 U.S. warships and the National Guard has been dispatched to the New York harbor. Also, military fighter jets, as you know, have been in the air over Manhattan. Manhattan has been shut down. A lot of roads in New Jersey, of course, have been shut down, where a lot of patients have been ferried to some of the hospitals in New Jersey. And all of the planes that were in the air that weren't involved in the attacks have now landed safely. By the way, also senior U.S. intelligence officials are telling NBC News that they would not steer us away from thinking that the United Airlines plane that crashed outside of Pittsburgh was targeting either Camp David or the nearby alternate National Military Command Center in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. The ANMCC, also known as Raven Rock, is the underground Pentagon, where in case of an attack on the Pentagon, military planners would take over command of the U.S. military. We're also being told that the U.S. Coast Guard is boarding and inspecting cargo ships before allowing entry into the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles. The harbor is the world's 3rd busiest airport. And of course, another note here saying that Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, the largest tenant in New York's destroyed World Trade Center towers, leased about 50 floors in the Twin Towers, and it declined to disclose how many employees worked in the landmark financial complex.
And we have the emergency numbers going along the bottom part of what on a normal day is our ticker, and this day is anything obviously but normal. So if you do need those numbers, we have them for you. They're running along the bottom part of our ticker for Morgan Stanley, for the Red Cross, because the Red Cross is looking for blood donations, Bill.
Or
you know.
It doesn't have to be blood. I mean, they'll take donations of money or clothing.
Yep. Absolutely, all of that. Bonnie mentioned the FAA had said that all the planes had landed safely, that were not involved in this terrorist incident this morning. They're now estimating that that's as many as 50 flights that were airborne during the time that the attack was underway in New York City.
The other market, I mean, Jen was talking about the price of oil that we often look at times of crisis. Gold, of course, is often one to move as well at times like these. On the phone is Frank Holmes, who runs U.S. Global in San Antonio, Texas, which they themselves have a couple of gold funds. And Frank, I thank you for joining us.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. What would you imagine? I mean, we've been hearing that gold has been trading higher. Is it reacting as you might expect at times like this?
Yes, this is gold is up $14 before it closed, and then we heard in aftermarkets around the world it was trading up to $290.
And Frank, can you explain for those people who might not understand, or because gold has been in a slump for so very many years, why gold is considered the safe haven in times like this? I mean, obviously the dollar is not considered that today. It's dropping. But explain the relationship between an incident like this and gold.
Well, gold has always been considered the original currency of exchange. And when we go to crisis, we see that the physical value of gold kicks on, besides the beautiful look for exchange.
Yeah, it appears we're on a cell phone with Mr. Holmes, and we're losing him at this point. Let's go back. You have some more information for us?
I just have a reaction from the Muslim groups from around the country who have been saying that we feel that our country and the U.S. Is under attack. All Americans should stand together and bring the perpetrators to justice. They, of course, say also that we warn against generalizations that will only serve to help the criminals and incriminate the innocent. Also, we have a reaction from the Palestinian militant group, the Hamas, saying that today America is reaping the same sort of misery and oppression that it has sowed around the world. But firstly, Hamas is saying we are against any attacks against civilians, nor do we condone attacks on the innocent. However, America has to go over its accounts, saying the Arabic expression for meaning that America has to rethink its past policies.
And of course, much is made of alleged threats, according to an editor who runs an Arab-based newspaper in London, quoted by Reuters, who said that it was his understanding that people close to the known terrorist Osama bin Laden 3 weeks ago were claiming that there was something planned that would be big and unprecedented. And today, Afghanistan's Taliban rulers who have connections to Osama bin Laden are saying that they are devastated by the terrorist attacks, and they have rejected suggestions that Osama bin Laden could be behind them. The quote from the Taliban is, "We have tried our best in the past. We are willing in the future to assure the United States in any kind of way that we can, any way that we can, that Osama bin Laden is not involved in these kinds of activities." I mean, I don't know what we're to make of that.
All sides out there. Also, Senator Orrin Hatch said this morning that this does have the markings of Osama bin Laden all over it because of the orchestration of the attacks, and listing several of the attacks that he has been linked to in the past, and the widespread, enormous organization and
one of his colleagues, we know, was to be sentenced tomorrow in federal court in Manhattan for the bombing of the embassy in Tanzania.
In Lower Manhattan is where the court
correct,
is.
yes. Yeah. Whether that is connected at all,
we don't know yet.
Of course we don't know at this point.
If you are just joining us, or if you were not with us earlier, we're going to try and give you a sense of a timeline of the events that happened this morning. It was just shortly before 9 a.m. East Coast time in Lower Manhattan when the first plane crashed into the tower of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. It was then about 18 to 20 minutes later, you see that explosion there? That was the second plane going into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. Then, shortly after that, we had a plane go into the Pentagon. It was absolutely unreal this morning to be watching our air live and see these events unfold, but unfortunately, that is exactly what did happen. Shortly after that, President Bush did make a statement. He was not in Washington at the time. He was on the road. He made a statement and then left to go we thought back to Washington. He did not end up back in Washington. He ended up in Shreveport, where just a short time ago he made a statement to reporters. The 4 planes that were involved, we've told you about briefly before. They were American Airlines Flight 77, Dulles to Los Angeles. It was a Boeing 757. American Airlines Flight 11, Boston to LA as well. 767, also a Boeing make. United Airlines Flight 93, Newark to San Francisco, California, a Boeing 757. It crashed outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And UAL, United Airlines Flight 175, Boston to LAX. That's Los Angeles International Airport, and that was a 767. All 4 of those planes were eventually supposed to end up in California. They did not. And California, incidentally, Bill, is one of the states among almost all around the nation who have taken a number of steps to close down not only airports but key landmarks in the city as well.
This is the kind of information we will probably be getting for a while now, as we all, especially those people who live in what's called the Tri-States area, perhaps know somebody who lives in that area, or given the companies that were centered in the World Trade Center complex. Akamai Technologies has just announced that its co-founder and chief technology officer, Dan Lewin, was among those killed in the World Trade Center crisis earlier today. Here's a guy I was a little concerned about, quite frankly. I hadn't heard from him in a while, but Bob Pisani is at the New York Stock Exchange, and I'm very happy to see you're safe and sound. Bob, what's going on?
Thank you. I just back from walking around outside to a bit of a ghost town, right? And the New York Stock Exchange had left.
Obviously, we're having a problem with Bob's microphone, and we'll get back to him as soon as we can. Let me bring Yale Hirsch in here. Yale's one of the great historians on Wall Street, who has seen many things occur, not only economically but politically and militaristically, and its impact on the stock market. And of course, you published the Stock Market Stock Traders Almanac, and you know, we're all looking back at times like the assassination of John F. Kennedy. We look back at Pearl Harbor. I also recall from my reading that at the beginning of World War I, they stopped trading for as long as 6 months at the New York Stock Exchange.
I believe it was 4 months, July into December.
But put this in perspective for us right now, and what this means historically to the financial markets of the United States.
Well, being that we're in a bear market and have just broken down, it doesn't bode well. This could take us down into the Dow 8000s as soon as they even open trading, if they do this week.
It would be unprecedented in our memory, though, would it not, Yale, for them not to open trading for the rest of the week?
Because of the clearing operations in the area that may have been demolished, it may be difficult for them to have electronic trading unless they go back to...
Can they go back to the old way of doing it? I mean, isn't that one of the arguments that people have been putting forward about the fact that the role of this... Will this not be a time when the role of the specialist is extremely important in
Yes.
matching up a buyer and a seller and
The human being
liquidity?
as opposed to the computer,
Yeah,
right?
but that would take me back to 1963 when President Kennedy was assassinated. And the market was not that fast, and it took the runoff went on till around 7 o'clock at night. So that would be something that we could expect now.
And in those days, they were trading, what, 10 to 15 million shares a day at the New York Stock Exchange, whereas we're doing more than 1 billion shares now.
Exactly.
As far as the other markets we itemize, gold, oil, they traditionally will be... They will rise at times like this, right?
And oil rising does not help the world economy, which you remember when the OPEC did their thing in November of 19...
Which one you're talking about?
1973.
Yep.
1973. And the market went straight down, and we didn't recover until really 82.
Yeah.
And the market...
We're going to go to Maria Bartiromo and to Bob Pisani on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Both of them, of course, were in Lower Manhattan. Maria, we heard from you a bit earlier this morning. You were really in the thick of things, and Bob, I know you were as well. So let's turn it over to you.
That's right. Let me just, before I check in with Bob, because Bob has been outside for the last couple of hours, really in the thick of things, but I just left the crowd where Dick Grasso was standing. Dick has all his lieutenants here on the floor of the exchange, just a few feet away from us, and he tells me that they're going to do a 6 p.m. conference call tonight, basically to tell us whether or not trading will go on tomorrow. He may come on and talk to us about what the New York Stock Exchange has planned going forward. He's considering it, but as I mentioned, the 6 p.m. conference call will be worth watching. We'll be here. We'll get that live, of course. Now, Bob, you just came in. You've got burnt papers. What have you been doing outside?
Well, I've been walking around, Maria, thank you, and just checking what's going on outside. It's a bit of a ghost town. About an hour and a half ago, they started releasing people from the buildings, and streams of people started coming out of the buildings, most of them with masks on or kerchiefs on. I talked to a few dozen of them. Obviously, a bit of a shell shock on the part of many of them. Many of them had family members that were in the World Trade Center, so obviously a very grim and unhappy situation out front. People have been quietly streaming back, and at this point, the sun came out about 45 minutes ago, Maria, and rather eerie situation because clouds of black smoke would occasionally billow down throughout the front of the stock exchange here on Broad Street, and occasionally the sky would literally go dark in front of the stock exchange. One of the really eerie things that is going on, Maria, and I know you've seen this as well, but folks, burnt papers. Pieces of burnt papers.
This says Chase on it. I'm wondering if there was an office in one of the towers.
I don't know, but there is burnt paper virtually everywhere on the street at this point, and about a half an inch of gray soot covering virtually everything that's down here. People are rather oddly are spraying down the sidewalks trying to regain some sense of normalcy, but the soot is virtually everywhere.
In fact, you could see it on our shoes. Bob and I took a walk together outside, and we came back really covered with it. Earlier, when I witnessed that third explosion, the third explosion being the collapse of one of the towers, I was filled with the soot, and it was really white powder all over me, and that's exactly what we're seeing out there right now.
Yeah, and the real panic, I think, in my mind occurred, Maria, I was out front as you were when the second explosion occurred because so many people had been attracted to what was going on. The explosion threw debris on top of a lot of people. That was when the real panic began. A lot of people began running over on top of other people. That's when things got quite serious. Right now, though, most of the people on Wall Street, as I was walking around on Broad Street and out front on Wall Street, have left the area, and the police have cordoned it off. It was very difficult to get back in the building. There's almost a state of martial law out front, almost. They're stopping everybody on the street and just letting people walk in one direction.
We should say that there's no one on this particular floor that we are on right now, but there are people in the other room of the New York Stock Exchange. In fact, the new technologically advanced room is where most of the people are, anyone who's even left here, and there are medical carts going around and there are lunches going around. So the New York Stock Exchange has obviously been incredibly helpful to employees who are trying to get out and have been unable to do so.
And indeed, they have been handing out food, and people out front have been handing out food, although, as I mentioned, a lot of people have basically left the area. There is still odd scenes where papers are still flying around up in the canyons high above from here, and so there's a still sort of otherworldly feeling down here with the soot and occasionally giant clouds of black smoke coming down the alleyways, almost like a mini tornado that's in the neighborhood. So we're still in a very strange environment, a surreal environment down here.
It really is. I mean, there are dark clouds really just continuing to move above us. So we're going to be walking outside and checking out things in here. We will report back as we know it.
And Bill, Sue, back to you.
All right, Bob, Maria, thank you very much. Of course, anecdotally, we hear stories on the wires about the hospitals of New York City and in Northern Virginia around Washington, not only being inundated, of course, with the injured, but with people who are attempting to give blood to those centers. And we are being told by the Red Cross to ask people not to go to those crisis areas, but rather to go to the outlying areas if you do plan to give blood, or at least if you had an appointment to give blood, to meet that appointment, but in the outlying areas away from the crisis areas, because as you can imagine, the medical personnel in those areas of New York City and around Washington are already being inundated trying to care for the injured. And we have another wire report that some of the injured involved have been flown to Canada as part of all this. We don't have numbers on that. But
before we go to Sharon Epperson, which we're going to do in a minute, Cantor Fitzgerald has asked us to pass along their emergency number to you if you are trying to find someone or have a question about someone who is with Cantor Fitzgerald. Their number is 212-704-8188. Once again, that's 212-704-8188 if you have someone with Cantor Fitzgerald.
Sharon Epperson is with us now, and you have a Federal Reserve official, right?
That's right. That's right. We do have a Federal Reserve official. I've been trying to call all of the Federal Reserve banks across the country because, of course, it's difficult to get a phone line into New York City. I was able to get through to the St. Louis Fed, and I believe Charles Henderson is on the phone. He is the public information officer there at the St. Louis Federal Reserve. Charles, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Tell me a little bit about how you're managing operations today.
Well, we've got two concerns. Obviously, one is the safety of our employees, and then, of course, the integrity of the payment system. And we're working very hard to ensure those. We're obviously on a state of heightened security, and we've taken some additional security measures and added some extra protection staff on duty today.
Now, you cover a 7-state area there. Tell me a little bit about the impact that you are anticipating there on the banks in your region.
Well, we're hopeful that if we do our job well, that the impact will be minimal. We want to make sure that all of our depository institutions that we deal with in the 7-state area continue to have uninterrupted services for cash or check or wire transfer and those kinds of things. And so far, we're continuing to operate as scheduled.
Yeah. Need to break in and interrupt because Mayor Rudolph Giuliani of New York is making a statement.
What will be done in the face of this barbaric act to make the city secure. And we will strive now very hard to save as many people as possible and to send a message that the city of New York and the United States of America is much stronger than any group of barbaric terrorists, that our democracy, that our rule of law, that our strength and our willingness to defend ourselves will ultimately prevail. And I'd ask the people of New York City to do everything that they can to cooperate, not to be frightened, to go about their lives as normal. Everything is safe right now in the city, and the people who are doing the relief effort need all the help they can get. And then, Governor, thank you very much for your assistance and your help and your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership through this crisis. This is a vicious attack upon New York. It's an attack upon America. It's an attack upon the whole concept of freedom and our way of life. And we cannot let these attacks succeed. The first step has to be to make sure we do everything in our power to protect the people and to save the lives of those whose lives are still at risk and to help those who have been injured. And I want to commend the mayor, and I want to thank my colleagues from Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and the federal government have all offered and made ready support to help us deal with this ongoing crisis. The people of New York are not only the freest and most diverse people in the world, we're also, I believe, the most capable of rising to meet the challenges of this type of attack. And right now, we want New Yorkers to remain calm, to go about their business, to appreciate the fact that everything to provide for their safety is being done, to appreciate that everything that can be done to provide for the health and the needs of the people who are still at risk is being done, and that we will continue to work to make sure that we get through this as strongly and quickly as possible. I want to thank the federal administration. Secretary Thompson has been on the phone with me a number of times, as well as the president, for what they are offering and prepared to do. And we're just confident that, well, this is a horrible attack and one that is despicable and really unthinkable in its magnitude. We will get through this, and we will continue to have a great and free country, state, and society.
Do we know the number of casualties at this point, sir?
I don't think we really want to speculate about that. The number of casualties will be more than any of us can bear ultimately. And I don't think we want to speculate on the number of casualties. The effort now has to be to save as many people as possible. And I don't think we will know the answer to that until sometime tomorrow or the next day.
Were there large numbers of firefighters?
There are a large number of firefighters and police officers who are in harm's way. And we don't know how many we've lost. But there's no doubt we've lost we've lost some firefighters and police officers.
Do you know anything about the cause of the explosions that brought the 2 buildings down yet? Was it caused by the planes or by something else?
We
Second explosion?
we believe that it was caused by the after effects of the planes hitting the buildings. We don't know of an additional explosion after that.
Mr. Mayor, could you tell us, do you expect any further attacks on New York? Is there anything to indicate that there could be more bombs, more planes out there? I know originally there was a report that 8 planes had been hijacked, 4 have only been accounted for. What about the remaining 4? And is there any possibility that there could be bombs on the ground planted by some...
We have no specific information to that effect. Obviously, the city is now closed. The airspace around the city is closed, and we are on heightened alert. But we have no specific information suggesting any further attack.
Mr. Mayor, can you tell us where the planes came from?
Why are 2 major warships coming into the port of New York?
I think to give the people of New York confidence, to show that the federal government is standing with us, and to just to make certain that nothing further happens. This has been a very, very difficult and traumatic day for the people of the United States and the people of the city. And I think that it's an act that shows that the federal government is going to do everything they can to support us and help us.
Can you give us an idea of the extent of the rescue effort that's going on right now in Lower Manhattan? What the scope of this operation?
There are over 1,000 rescue workers, probably about 2,000 that are deployed, trying to get into the buildings, trying to find people, trying to search for people. The governor and I spoke a couple of hours ago, and the governor has deployed the National Guard to relieve them because our people are going to need reinforcements pretty soon. But right now they don't want to leave because they're searching for innocent citizens, and they're searching for some of their brothers and sisters.
Are you finding survivors?
Yes, we have some numbers that we can give you. We have 1,500 people at Liberty State Park who were evacuated, described as walking wounded. They were evacuated by ferry and other means. There are about 600 as of about 15 minutes ago in local hospitals that we account for, 600 people that are being treated in local hospitals. And there are 150 in particular that were critical, that were moved by EMS. New York City has 170 hospitals. So we have a lot of hospitals, and we're utilizing all of them. Probably the one that was the hardest hit was St. Vincent's Hospital. And I would like to just single them out and commend them, because as I was rushing down there, after the first plane hit, and before the second, they were already deploying people on the street. I could see the doctors and nurses outside getting ready to receive people. And that was before the second plane actually hit the World Trade Center.
What was your experience down there?
Also blood donations. We have several sites for blood donations. 153 East 53rd Street, 66th in Amsterdam, which is the Red Cross, and 310 East 67th Street. If people want to do something and they can donate blood, that's going to help not just today, but tomorrow and the next day. This relief effort is going to take some time.
Mr. Mayor, you were one of the first people down there. Can you describe the scene in your own words, what you saw down there?
I don't know that I'm really able to describe it. It was the most horrific scene I've ever seen in my whole life. We saw the World Trade Center in flames, a big gaping hole all the way on the top of it. We could see people jumping from the top of the building. And then we went into Barclay Street, 75 Barclay Street, I think it was, and we were there when the building collapsed, and it collapsed in part on 75 Barclay Street. So we were trapped in the building for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, trying to get out different exits. And we finally went through a basement and came out 100 Park Place.
Did you ever fear for your own safety, sir?
Sure, yeah.
What went through your mind?
I don't think anything went through my mind other than making sure that we all remained calm and found an exit and just tried to figure out the most intelligent thing to do. Probably the same thing that went through the minds of 10,000 other New Yorkers who I could see on the streets, and I really have to commend them. If you really want to know what New Yorkers are all about, you just watch the way in which they handle themselves. They didn't panic. They moved deliberately. They moved swiftly. But they didn't hurt each other. They helped each other. I mean, these are just the most wonderful people in the world.
Do we know anything about the composition of that dust that blankets Lower Manhattan? Is there any asbestos or any hazardous material in that dust?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to
Mr. Mayor, I got reports of a gas explosion related to this. Are you aware of that? There was a gas leak or possible explosion?
We don't believe it. We don't believe that's the case.
Mr. Mayor, can you tell us anything about where the planes come from, where the aircraft came from?
Bill Diamond reminds me that we've turned off the gas in the city buildings, just to be certain.
Can you tell us
as a
anything
precaution
about where these aircraft came from? There was a report they may have been hijacked in Boston.
I think we should leave. I think we should leave that up to the federal government to rule. Yes, we do have some information, but I think we should leave that up to the federal government to release that information. Our focus is on the relief efforts. And
Governor, do you think there should be any retaliation on the part of the United States for what happened here in this country, both in New York, Washington, and other places?
First step right now, Marcia, is to make sure we do everything to help those people who need our support, and whether they're injured or still trapped in buildings. The second thing is to make sure at the same time we're providing the maximum security against possible additional incidents. But clearly, this is an attack upon America. It's an attack upon our freedom and our way of life, and we must retaliate and go after those who perpetuated this heinous crime against the people of America.
Mayor, this is compared to Pearl Harbor. Do you consider this to be an act of war? This has been compared.
I'll do both.
This has been compared to Pearl Harbor. Do you consider this to be an act of war?
This is a vicious, unprovoked, horrible attack on innocent men, women, and children. It's one of the most heinous acts, certainly in world history. And as the governor said, and I said to the president, we fully and completely support him in any action that he has to take in order to make an example out of the people who are responsible for this.
Is it an act of war in your mind?
I don't know that I want to use those words. I think the president is the one that has to respond, and I think what he has to know is that all of us in New York support him, and support him completely in the efforts that he's going to have to make over the next couple of days, week, and to make a point that people can't do this. You can't attack innocent men, women, and children. And ultimately, I'm totally confident that American democracy and the American rule of law will prevail. And the people of New York are going to help to demonstrate that over the next couple of days.
Anybody take responsibility for this? Any group take responsibility at this time? And what is the city doing to safeguard the citizens now that something like this has happened?
Well, first of all, I don't know of anyone that's taken responsibility for it at this time. And secondly, the New York City Police Department is fully deployed, not just in the rescue effort, but all throughout the city of New York, offering as much protection and as much security as we're capable of for the citizens of the city. And at this point, I believe that the people in New York City can demonstrate our resolve and our support for all of the people that were viciously attacked today by going about their lives and showing everyone that vicious, cowardly terrorists can't stop us from being a free country and a place that functions. And we'll do everything we can to make that point.
Jennifer Steiner, please. Just a housekeeping thing. Can you tell us what's going to happen to the New York primary?
This morning, I issued an order suspending the primary across the state. There will be no primary today, and we'll reschedule it once we get through this.
Jennifer,
Mayor,
please.
can you please walk us through the municipal services right now? What's going on with the subways and the schools, the courts?
The subway, the schools, the chancellor, I commend the chancellor. He was on the phone a number of times with us. He coordinated very, very carefully what would happen. He thought it out, and he came up with a very good plan, which was essentially to keep the schools open, to keep the children in school, so we didn't have a large number of children in the different boroughs that would be released from school. They're being released, I shouldn't say as normal, but basically on the normal schedule. If parents aren't there to pick up the young children, then the children will be taken to a center, and the parents will be notified to come and pick them up. The children who have Metro cards, who normally travel on the subway, will be able to do that. The subways are functioning in 4 of the 5 boroughs. And can we get an update, Joe, on how the subway is doing in Manhattan?
All the lettered lines are working.
And in Manhattan?
In Manhattan lines, all the lettered lines.
All the lettered lines are working, including in Manhattan. And throughout the rest of the city, public transportation is normal. So the children should be able to return from school in the normal fashion. And if any children don't have parents to pick them up, then we'll hold them, let the parents know, and then the parents can come and pick them up.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned you were on Barclay Street. What's the radius of damage that's been affected? How many other side streets around the world?
I don't think we know yet. The whole area of Lower Manhattan has been very much affected by it.
How many police and fire are involved? Like how many all NYPD off-duty officers, that they come in? Or like
All NYPD and FDNY officers are on duty now.
How
and we're going to need all of them. And again, thanks to the governor and the way in which the state reacted, we will have 1,600 National Guard to relieve them over a period of time, so we can get some relief for them.
If anybody's looking for someone that may have been in the World Trade Center or in and around that area, what should they do? How can they do it?
We're going to give you numbers so that we can try to help coordinate that. Individual businesses have already done that, but we will as soon as we can find some time from the relief efforts, give you a number in which people can call, and then we can direct them to the right place.
The National Guard looting or anything like that? Any lawlessness?
There have been no reports of lawlessness, no reports of looting. As I said, we saw a lot of people that were part of the escape effort, and they seem to be conducting themselves in a very, very sensible way, a very deliberate way. They seem to be helping each other. So I don't think we have any reports like that at all.
So the only National Guard we'll see will be in Lower Manhattan, in the bomb site area. They won't be patrolling the rest of Manhattan.
No, the purpose of it is to help with the relief effort. We're going to need the help of the state, surrounding areas with heavy-duty equipment.
When will they be arriving?
National Guard troops, some have arrived already, and we expect to have up to close to 2,000 between the National Guard and the state police by later this evening.
Mayor Bridges and tunnels will have to stay closed indefinitely?
I think everything is closed for now, and then maybe in about an hour or two we can give you an update on what the plan will be for tomorrow.
We saw a lot of lightly injured people walking out of the area because obviously the emergency services were needed for the very seriously injured. People covered with dust, some people had difficulty breathing. Is there any health advice to give to people who were caught in this thing, who are not necessarily at risk of losing their life, but
I think
dust?
well, obviously, if you feel ill or you feel that you've been affected by it, you should go to a hospital and get checked out. But if it's just discomfort that you feel, then you can do basically what we did, was to wash our faces off and get rid of the clothes and get to an area where you can breathe in fresh air.
How many people were in the World Trade Center at the time of this attack?
I mean, it was business had already started. It was
So what's normal
right before 9 o'clock. I don't know. I don't know.
Tens of thousands?
Yes. Approximately. Someone just gave me a number of approximately 10,000, but that's that's a guess.
How long will the city remain on a heightened state of alert?
Until we're told not to. I mean, until the FBI and the police department and the federal government tells us that we shouldn't. Right now, the city is should be on a state of alert. Now, instead of frightening people, that should make people feel more confident that everything is being done to keep things secure. And again, let me emphasize that the reason for the National Guard, because I heard the question before, is to help with the relief effort, not because there's any fear of any other problems in the city right now.
How is the
Mr.
Port
Mayor, can you
Authority
tell us
certain
about
kinds of
the other
buildings,
public
Mr.
buildings, City Hall, One Police Plaza? When will it be safe for you to return?
I don't know yet. I don't know yet. Hopefully soon, but I don't know the answer to that.
And we heard reports that One Police Plaza was evacuated. Was that true?
No, the command center is open.
And it was never.
We have people in the command center right now.
Mr. Mayor, there have also been reports of large loss of life among the police and firemen who were sent there to rescue people. How accurate are those reports?
There is no question that we lost police officers and firefighters, and some that I know personally, and all of us here know personally, that we're very worried about. And we're not going to know the answer to that until much later. And maybe we should just close now and give you a briefing later. And I would just ask everyone, I talked to Cardinal Egan before, because he's at St. Vincent's Hospital. Everybody should, in their own way, say a prayer and ask God for help and for assistance, and also ask God to give us the strength to overcome this, because I know we're going to need strength to overcome it. And I want the people of New York to be an example to the rest of the country and the rest of the world that terrorism can't stop us. American democracy is much stronger than vicious, cowardly terrorists, and we're going to overcome this.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done, Mayor.
We know when the
Governor Pataki and Mayor Giuliani, most especially, recounting his own harrowing experience this morning. He was in the financial district this morning when the first jet did hit the World Trade Center
And
tower.
The mayor was telling us that a number of the subways and other transportation out of Manhattan is working. Nonetheless, getting to that transportation is difficult, and as a result, a number of New Yorkers have decided that perhaps the easiest, best, safest way to get to where they need to go, which at this point is probably home, is to walk. And this is a bridge in Manhattan. I'm not sure which one it is. It looks like the Brooklyn Bridge, but I'm not sure. It's the Manhattan Bridge. Thank you, Christopher. And they are walking across it.
On a day of remarkable images anyway,
Yes.
yet another remarkable image in New York City. We had some other pictures above the New York City skyline, which has changed dramatically, of course, with the demise of the World Trade Center towers there in Lower Manhattan.
Which are no longer there.
We will continue to show you those as the day progresses here. Bonnie Barron is back with more of the developments of the day as we get more bits of information here and there to try and put this story together.
And more remarkable personal stories about where we all were when this happened. Governor Pataki and Mayor Giuliani, of course, mentioning where they were when it happened. And our own Ron Insanis, we've seen him covered with dust on...
yes, he was in Lower Manhattan this morning.
The FAA has suspended all air traffic across the United States, as you may have heard this morning. It is believed to be the first time that has happened, and the FAA says no flights will fly until at least noon tomorrow. Also, the San Francisco airport has begun evacuations, and the Mall of America in Minnesota has closed as a precaution. A couple of updates there. And also, on a final note, Mayor Giuliani was asked to compare this to Pearl Harbor, where 2,400 people were killed. Sad to say, of course, that we think these numbers most likely will go much higher.
And we won't know probably for several days. Thank you, Bonnie. Consuelo Mack, one of our colleagues here at CNBC, joins us now with some more perspective on the day. Consuelo?
Right, Sue. I think we have an expert in political risk standing by, Benjamin Weiner, who is from his firm Probe International out of Stamford, Connecticut. And there he is. Ben, thanks very much for your patience in waiting for us. You and I talked earlier. Can you hear me, Ben?
Yes, I can.
You know, 30 years, you told me, of covering terrorists. You've never seen an attack like this. You know, what's your analysis?
Well, what impressed me was the precision, and I could almost use the term brilliant execution of this horrific act. The fact that they were able to identify and focus on important icons. The World Trade Center is an icon of capitalism. The Pentagon is an icon of America's defensive might. They were able to pick out the kinds of targets they wanted. They were able to coordinate flights so that the explosions would take place in a relatively compact period of time. This obviously is not a crazed amateur walking into a coffee shop in Tel Aviv or anywhere. These are people who've had training, who know how to deal with aircraft, who know how to deal with bombs, who obviously had good funding, who obviously had places from which they could work with a great deal of cover for them, which leads me to a conclusion that, and of course we don't know where we're going with this. It could be an Osama bin Laden who's had the experience and the background and the safe haven. At the same time, it could be Iran or some other government, or Iraq that was involved in some way in this. And it's going to be some time before we get the answers to it. But it is something that is going to be very important in terms of how we handle these issues in the future. Obviously, we haven't done as well as we should.
Let me ask you, I know it is speculation, certainly whomever did it was well funded, as you said, had a strategy, had a network able to pull this off. And we're going to have some breaking news here, so hold on a second. I'm going to go back to the anchor desk to Sue and Bill.
Consuelo, thank you. Apparently they're holding a news conference at LAX, at Los Angeles International Airport, to update us on the situation there. We know that that airport is closed, but let's listen in.
Position in flight. We have also ordered that certain aircraft be certain airports have strict security measures, including evacuation. We'll be working directly with those management of the airport, to ensure that security measures are taken and that operations get back to normal just as soon as possible. That's all I have for you right now. Thank you.
With the number of airplanes involved in this incident that were headed towards LAX, are you taking any extra precautions here at this airport?
Los Angeles International is one of the airports that we've asked to be evacuated early on and work directly with security here to maintain safety and security. These actions were taken and at many different stages, many different levels at security to provide safety all the way down to basic levels of checking vehicles that may not normally have been suspicious, but in this heightened state of emergency.
All right, we're obviously having a feed problem from Los Angeles. One note that we want to tell you about, NBC News is reporting that the president has now landed at Offutt Air Force Base, where he is going to be obviously huddling with his advisors. And the vice president is in another location, and they will be coordinating throughout the day. We do expect a statement from the Bush administration a little bit later this afternoon.
The reason we went to Los Angeles there, significant or not, 3 of the 4 flights involved in the crashes today were destined for Los Angeles, 2 out of Boston, 1, I believe, was out of Dulles. So that's why we were trying to hear if they had any new information there at LAX. Consuelo, back to you.
Thanks so much. And back to Ben Weiner in Stamford, Connecticut. Ben, are you still there?
Consuelo, during the break there, I noted one of the things that has not happened, and I hope it doesn't, is that religious institutions have not been targeted.
I was going to ask you that because is this it? Now what? Could there be a follow-up to these attacks?
Well, a lot of the fundamentalists look upon the West and upon Christianity, Western governments and Christianity, as one and the same. So that it's possible that religious institutions could be targeted, and also Jewish institutions, because their New Year, Rosh Hashanah, takes place next week. So there's a need for continued alertness in this context.
And is there a need for continued alertness by Americans basically everywhere as well, Ben? Is this something that's just going to happen in this country, or could Americans be targets elsewhere as well?
Well, there was a fatwa issued, a religious edict issued a couple of years ago by Osama bin Laden and some of his cohorts. And may I take a moment just to excerpt something here?
If it's quick.
It was, the ruling to kill the Americans and their allies, civilians and military, is an individual for every Muslim who can do it in any country.
Ben, appropriate policy response, is there, number one, what should Washington do? And number two, what can we do to prevent something like this happening if we can?
Well, you know, there's an old canard about if they want you, they'll get you. And this is particularly frightening when we realize the lives of the perpetrators are irrelevant. They're quite willing to blow themselves up in this context. So in terms of being able to do something and not worry about being caught or being killed is something we have to be concerned about. And how we're going to deal with this is one thing. I don't think, you know, vengeance is mine, said the Lord. I don't think we should panic. I don't think we should get involved in any vigilantism, whether on an individual or a national basis. And we should slow down and think this thing through, and when we act, we should act forcefully.
All right. Ben Weiner, thank you very much for Probe International out of Stamford, Connecticut. Thanks,
You're welcome.
Ben. And back to you, Sue and Bill.
Consuelo, thank you very much. Bonnie Barron stepping back in with more developments as they're being released.
Thank you, Bill and Sue. Where the President Bush is now at Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska. As Sue just mentioned, it is the 55th wing. It is the largest and most diverse wing in Air Combat Command, executing worldwide reconnaissance, command and control, and presidential support, treaty and verification, and airlift missions. And also, we now have the information on the name of the pilot of one of the planes used in today's horrible terrorist attack. His name was Tom McGinnis. He is from Stratham, New Hampshire. And his church officials say that he is a father of two, and they were with his wife when she was told that he was involved in the crash and killed in the crash.
An airline slice.
Right.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Now to Mike Huckman with some perspective on this as well. Mike?
And the response from corporate America, really, to what's been going on.
Yeah, no doubt, Sue and Bill, that companies big and small today have let their employees go home simply because of the distraction level. But one has to wonder whether when we're talking about three of the world's biggest corporations, if there is much more to it than that. So I just got off the phone a short time ago with spokespeople for each of the big three automakers, and this is how these companies are responding to the attack today. Let's take a look at that graphic now. Daimler Chrysler is saying that it has shut down its Auburn Hills headquarters and all of its United States, not North American, just United States Chrysler Group offices and plants. That is only Dodge, Chrysler, and Plymouth. That does not include the Mercedes-Benz manufacturing plants in the U.S. GM, and that's Daimler Chrysler, really taking the largest steps here in terms of a response. General Motors has shut down its headquarters building in downtown Detroit. It's called the Renaissance Center, and from a landmark perspective, it's really the equivalent in Detroit to New York City's World Trade Center. They have also shut down a 250-person office in New York City, which was not located, by the way, in the World Trade Center, and they have closed a small office of about 24 people in Washington, D.C. However, they have closed 4 plants. One of them is in Linden, New Jersey, and that's because of its proximity to the New York area. The second one is in Wilmington, Delaware, and that is because the governor of Delaware, GM says, has declared a state of emergency. And so they followed up by closing the plant in Wilmington, and they've also closed 2 plants, a transmission plant and an assembly plant in Baltimore, Maryland. And there again, it's simply because of its proximity to the Washington, D.C. area. Ford, on the other hand, with its what they call the Glass House, its headquarters in Dearborn, Michigan, has only closed its headquarters building at this point. But as spokespeople for each of the big three told me that they are evaluating this situation on a minute-by-minute basis, and there could be more closures. Now, I hesitate to even bring this up at the risk of sounding insensitive at this time, but some, of course, may be asking how much all these closures and inconveniences, if you will, that this could cost the big three automakers and other American corporations. Obviously, as one spokesperson told me for one of the big three, that their focus at this point obviously is on the people, on the victims and their families, that they are not willing to make any kind of estimate at this point of what this might end up costing the companies. But in Daimler Chrysler's case, the closures extend throughout today only. So after the first shift, which ended about now, so second and third shifts will not be done at the Daimler Chrysler plants. And for GM, they say they're going to evaluate this on a day-to-day basis. Keep in mind as well that many of these companies depend on what's called just-in-time delivery, where parts are brought into plants as needed, and they're usually flown in. So depending on how long this no-fly order from the FAA is in effect, depends on what kind of impact this is going to have on these companies.
Mike, thanks. Mike Huckman.
Yep.
We're going to go to Scott Cohn now, who's at our Carnegie New York Bureau, and he's had a chance to take a look at another aspect of the story, some of the businesses that are in that particular area of Manhattan. Scott?
Yeah, Sue, you know, the World Trade Center, for those who are not from New York, not familiar with it, is a much more enormous complex than just those 2 towers that we've been so familiar with. There are 7 buildings. This complex situated on 12 million square feet on 16 acres. It's a really complex facility, including not just a number of offices, but also a shopping mall, a hotel, and the trains that go back and forth to and from New Jersey, and a main New York City subway station as well. So we've been trying to get a sense of some of the businesses that are there and what they're saying, and naturally this information is slow in coming. I will start with some positive notes, areas that we do know. Nike, which maintains a Cole Haan store in the World Trade Center complex, says that its employees, 10 employees there, are okay. Charles Schwab also has a branch office there, and they believe that the employees are okay. But the areas that are of much more uncertainty here. Morgan Stanley, Dean Witter, we've been talking about, which leases 50 floors of the World Trade Center complex. You're seeing the number crawl by on your screen on our ticker where people can call for information. No word yet on the situation with the employees there. Cantor Fitzgerald and eSpeed, which are, of course, do a major clearing business, particularly in the Treasury bond market, Treasury futures market, with 1,000 people on several floors, several upper floors of the World Trade Center, also not talking yet about what the situation is with them. The state of New York has about 300 employees located there, as well as the U.S. government, which operates the Customs House there, and quickly a couple of other names that you certainly would be familiar with watching CNBC. Keefe, Bruyette & Woods is headquartered in the World Trade Center, the big banking analysis firm. Oppenheimer has headquarters in or near the World Trade Center. The New York Society of Security Analysts is there, and the National Association of Business Economics was holding its annual meeting at the Marriott Hotel in the World Trade Center. No word from any of these groups on the status of the people there. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Before we continue, we have a note for you that the FBI will be holding a news briefing at 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time today. We will, of course, have that for you. We expect to get some more details on the horrific events of this morning. 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time is when we expect that. Bill?
The Federal Reserve has announced that Fed Chairman Greenspan is still in Basel, Switzerland, where he was attending a bankers conference. He actually got on an airplane to come back to the United States when he learned of the terrorist attacks and was turned back because of the FAA regulation, which essentially put U.S. airspace in lockdown status. So the Fed Chairman, we are told, is in that area, but they are not saying exactly where he is for security purposes. Michelle Caruso-Cabrera joins us once again, kind of a quick look at what's been happening so far today. Michelle?
Hello, Bill. Military officials are now saying that the U.S. has not been attacked like this since Pearl Harbor, and now the U.S. is on high security alert as a result of the terrorist acts that hit New York and the United States today. It started around 9 a.m. this morning when a plane crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York. The FBI says it was a United Airlines plane, Flight 175 from Boston to Los Angeles. About 18 minutes later, the plane you see here, an American Airlines plane, Flight 11, also from Boston to Los Angeles, hit the South Tower. Moments later, the South Tower collapsed, and that was later followed by the North Tower. That is what you are watching there. Eyewitness accounts from the ground say that people were falling and jumping from the towers. And then another United Airlines plane, Flight 93 from Newark to San Francisco, crashed into western Pennsylvania. No official word yet if that crash was part of this terrorist wave as well. The White House has been evacuated, and President Bush is now, we have learned, on the ground in Omaha, Nebraska. Earlier today, he gave a statement on the situation while in Louisiana.
Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
The FBI says another American Airlines Flight 77 from Dulles Airport to Los Angeles crashed into the Pentagon, and explosions also occurred at the State Department. The Capitol has been evacuated, and the congressional leaders have been taken to a secure location. Federal government offices in Washington are closed. All U.S. embassies and consulates have been notified to take adequate precautions. And meanwhile, all U.S. securities markets are closed today as well, following the attack. The SEC suspended all trading today. The market may not reopen tomorrow. A conference call to decide just that will occur at 6 p.m. Eastern Time today. The global markets, in the meantime, definitely reacting to this. The FTSE closing down more than 5%. The DAX down 8%. It had been down 11%. And this is one of the worst one-day drops ever for the Frankfurt DAX. In Paris, the CAC 40 fell 7.4%. Milan, Amsterdam, Stockholm, Prague, Vienna, Zurich, we are all seeing those markets get hit very hard today. For now, London, Germany, and Tokyo say they do plan to reopen tomorrow. That could change. In the Treasuries, commodities, and currency markets, we are seeing Treasuries surge and a flight to quality move. Gold has been surging. It is at $290 an ounce. This is the spot price we are talking about, the December futures contract, not trading here in the United States. Oil up about 10%. Where it is trading, not here in the U.S. The dollar has been falling versus the yen and the euro, a 7-month low versus the euro, in fact. So we are definitely seeing reactions there. All flights in the U.S. have been canceled. All international flights have been diverted to Canada. Exactly what happened to Alan Greenspan when trying to come back from Switzerland. All bridges and tunnels into Manhattan shut down, and Major League Baseball has canceled all games for tonight. And we could go on and on. Numerous cancellations today. Bill, Sue?
All right,
Michelle, thank you very much.
The Pope has made a statement in writing out of Rome. Pope John Paul II has condemned what he called the unspeakable horror of the terrorist attacks in New York and Washington, saying today that he was praying for the victims and for their families. And he implores the survivors to bear up under their suffering and trial. In addition to that, of course, we are waiting momentarily, we believe, or at least in the next few moments, for the FBI to begin its news conference, which we will be taking live for you. It is expected to begin at about 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Obviously, they have been scrambling to get together all of the details of this morning's horrific events in New York City. Jane Wells is in Los Angeles, and of course, the West Coast is in shock, really, especially in California, because all of those planes were headed for some part of California, Jane, and I know the reaction there has been one of horror, just as it has been here.
You know, Sue, it's so different from a natural disaster where you feel sympathy for the people at the epicenter or at ground zero, but this attack has made everyone feel vulnerable. And as you said, especially here on the West Coast, where all 4 of these flights were headed either to San Francisco or Los Angeles. We have video of some of the families of those passengers arriving at LAX. They were taken to a special area where they can get information and counseling. And like you've been hearing, the rest of the country's experience, the entire airport has been shut down. All flights canceled for the day. The terminals being cleared out. Passengers being told to go home. Much of the rest of the city, like cities everywhere, shut down. Commercial areas shut down. Armed FBI outside the federal building here. Every high-rise basically evacuated. Even Disneyland is closed. As Americans everywhere are stunned and they're worried.
People don't feel safe. I think that when something like this happens, that you question everything that you do, and right now we're trying to secure our families and our people inside our business the best that we possibly can.
If life stops, we allow them to win. We can't allow them to win. We have to go on.
I have my family in New York, and I'm trying to reach them and relatives all in New York City, and it's devastating, and you just think it's too quiet out here right now. So I'm hoping that's good, but I don't know.
It really is quiet here today. There's not even much traffic. And in places like up north, security's been tightened at the Golden Gate Bridge, the Transamerica building, that San Francisco landmark has been closed down. Trains have been stopped. There's some concern in the short term of what that might mean to gasoline supplies. I could go on and on and on, but the biggest concern here is for the families of those passengers bound for Los Angeles and San Francisco. Presumably, some of the flight crews were also based here in California. So a lot of worry still here on the West Coast, as in many places. And guys, I'm just trying to figure out how I explain this to my kids tonight. How do you explain this in ways that they can understand without scaring them? I don't know how to do that yet.
I don't think anybody does.
Thinking that very same thing myself, Jane.
I don't think any of us understand it. So how can we explain it?
Yet.
I think you have a lot of company in that, Jane.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jane Wells in Los Angeles. Bonnie Barron, right?
Bonnie right now.
I think not only are a lot of us still in shock, but I think a lot of us are still processing what we've witnessed either by sight or by on television reports of what's going on. We have what may be the first of many declarations by a U.S. Senator. Kansas Senator Pat Roberts says today's terror attacks, quote, he says, this is war. The Republican leader says today's terrorism shows that America must beef up its intelligence efforts. He was speaking, of course, from what he called a safe area away from his office. He said, I have to tell you, this is an intelligence failure. Sue and Bill, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie.
Another story that we have through NBC News, before we get to Phil LeBeau in Chicago, of another victim of all of this. Barbara Olson, who's the wife of the United States Solicitor General Ted Olson, was on the flight out of Dulles Airport. This is the flight that struck the Pentagon. I don't want to say it's the one out of Dulles, but it is the flight that struck the Pentagon. And according to a friend of the Olsons, she called her husband, Mr. Olson, Solicitor General, on her cell phone and informed him that they were being hijacked. And as she did that, the line went dead. And that's the last he heard from her. And earlier we had said that the co-founder of the information technology company called Akamai Technologies, Dan Lewin, was on a flight from Boston, one of the flights that struck the World Trade Center he perished in that as well. That announcement coming directly from Akamai Technologies.
Chicago is also on high alert, as are a number of cities throughout the United States. As a matter of fact, almost all major cities. Phil LeBeau is in Chicago, and he joins us now with a reaction there. Phil?
You know, Sue, we heard Jane Wells mention earlier that it was very quiet in Los Angeles, and it's the same situation here in Chicago. If you look down the street, we're just a block away from the Chicago Merc. You see a few people who are walking, presumably going home, taking the trains home, but this is nowhere close to what it's usually like in the middle of the day. Our building is right there next to the Sears Tower. We were basically told you can stay if you want, but wink, wink, we're shutting down some of the elevators, and I wouldn't stay in the building. And also, here's the Sears Tower. Here's the main concern for a number of people here in Chicago. There was concern that this might be a target. A couple of blocks from here is the Chicago Board of Trade, and as we've been talking about all day, the CBOT, where the treasuries are traded, as well as the Merc, where the futures are traded, those shut down trading about 9:30 Central Time. Rick Santelli covers the Board of Trade for us. Rick, give us some sense of what happened this morning as we were watching the events in New York and the trading slowly stopped.
Well, actually, the first thought on the Chicago Board of Trade is that it was a small plane that hit one of the towers. Trading was concerned, the markets were affected, but it wasn't until the second blast hit, the second building had a plane move into it, that the traders then started to put together the ramifications, what was occurring, and the talk that the New York Stock Exchange wasn't going to open, the Sears Tower was being evacuated, and the heads of all the Chicago exchanges talked, and the first thing they did was address the equity markets. The Dow futures and options were closed at 9:21 Eastern. What progressed then was the existing markets that were already open were then shut down at 10:15 Eastern, and from there, traders then moved out of the building, and you saw what started out as concern move to a generalized, somewhat state of panic, especially some of the staff and operations. The traders were the last to leave the building, but at that point, it became a safety concern. The last thought on people's minds were the markets.
Okay. Rick, we're going to be watching this all day long, and I know you've been talking with people at the Board of Trade as well as at the Merc. All of the markets will be talking later today in a conference call to make some kind of a decision about whether or not trading will resume tomorrow or if it's going to be delayed a little bit further on. But I can tell you, Bill and Sue, it's very strange to be in a big city like this. Certainly, it's nothing like what's going on in Manhattan, but almost all of the major skyscrapers, the Sears Tower, John Hancock, the Aon building, which used to be the Amoco building here in Chicago, all of them have shut down, and really it's slowly becoming a bit of a ghost town at a time when it's usually thriving with a lot of business people. Bill and Sue?
Phil, thanks very much. Phil LeBeau there in Chicago. Bob Pisani is on the phone now back at the World Trade Center complex there in Lower Manhattan. What do you see right now, Bob?
Well, Bill, I'm standing on the corner of what was Liberty and Trinity Place. I am on the site of what is left of the South Tower. And as I left you about an hour ago, I came down the street and came onto the site along with the first wave of EMS people that were allowed in. There is an enormous pile, a 30-foot pile of wreckage that is now being scaled by emergency EMS people looking for any signs of life. Firemen are trying to scale this very small mountain of rubble here. It is rather difficult to breathe. There is still enormous amounts of smoke and debris in the air. And there is also a somewhat, I'm not sure if it's an unstable building to the left of me here, but the firemen are not getting near it, and they are a bit concerned about it as I see them not even going near it, just sort of staring at it at this point. But the sky is dark here, although the sun has come out as I have been walking around outside of the exchange, which is about a quarter mile away. On the site itself, which is where I'm standing right now, it is black all around us, and you cannot even see the sun right now. So, Bill, you can imagine they are just climbing it like ants climbing the side of a mountain now, looking for any signs of life here, and obviously a rather grim business going about. But this was within the last 20 to 25 minutes was the first time they were letting people actually on top of the mountain. There are big 30-foot tall twisted curtains of the side of the trade center that is standing here like some surreal scene in front of us, and I think they are a little concerned about the stability of that as well. They won't let anyone near it, but I am 75 feet right now watching a large number of firemen just starting to scale the side of this mountain of rubble looking for people. Bill?
Bob Pisani, Lower Manhattan there at the World Trade Center complex. Thanks.
And Rebecca Quick joins us now because we are all trying to put some perspective on this particular situation and put it perhaps in historical perspective. It obviously is one of the biggest disasters the United States has suffered, certainly domestically, if not the. And Rebecca Quick has had a chance to take a look back in history for us. Rebecca?
Well, Sue, as you said, this is clearly one of the greatest tragedies our nation has ever faced. People we've been talking to all day long can't help but compare it to the assassination of President Kennedy or looking back at the attack on Pearl Harbor. And clearly this is going to be a day that everyone remembers where they were when they heard the news. We have had, today has another dubious distinction in that there are very few events that can actually rock the nation's confidence enough to close the financial markets. Of course, in our past history, the markets have occasionally been shuttered. Earlier on our air, market historian Brian Taylor was explaining that during World War I, the markets actually closed from August through December of 1914. He said that there was some taking place off of the official markets, and that's why the stock exchange eventually reopened its door. Another time of tragedy, President Kennedy, when he was assassinated, it was a Friday, and on that day the markets experienced a sharp sell-off in the hour or so that it took them to actually shut down the stock exchange. Of course, in those days it took longer to shut down the exchange. But by the time the markets began trading again the following week, President Johnson had been sworn in, the nation was feeling more secure, and stocks rebounded, more than making up for the losses on that previous Friday. Today I spoke with Professor Jeremy Siegel over at the Wharton School of Business. He was saying that he often tells his students about the terror and the panic that was running through the nation during the Cuban Missile Crisis and that was also running through the financial markets. And when I spoke with him today, he compared today's feelings and today's emotions to just that feeling that he felt at that time. However, he did say that he thinks the markets should reopen again as soon as possible.
We all know that uncertainty drives stock prices down, and there is a tremendous amount of uncertainty that is involved here, and shock and disbelief and grief, and clearly this is going to weigh on the markets. I think they should open, though. I think we have to show the rest of the world that we're going to function as normally as possible.
Now, the markets, as we've been telling you, will be holding a conference call at 6 p.m. Eastern Time to determine whether there will be trading tomorrow. For the immediate time right now, Sue, though, we're all just focusing on the rescue efforts taking place across the country. Back to you, Sue.
All right, Becky. Thanks very much. Saw an email from a couple of viewers saying that maybe we all should put out our flags tonight as a little show of unity, if you have one outside the house there. Huh?
And if not, find one.
Yeah.
And put it out. Cuban President Fidel Castro is expected to weigh in. We're getting global reaction, really, to all of this, and Bonnie Barron's going to have more on that for us in just a second. But we are getting global reaction to all of this. The Australian Prime Minister has sent a letter to President Bush expressing his horror with the situation today. That's according to NBC News. In addition to that, Cuban President Fidel Castro is expected to make a statement on his national television tonight about this at about 6 p.m. Eastern Time, which incidentally is when we are going to get a statement, hopefully from the major U.S. stock exchanges. They are going to be holding a conference call, and we will be getting some more details on when trading here in the U.S. will resume. And a reminder that we are still waiting for the FBI to hold its press conference, which should be occurring shortly. As you can imagine, it is a very fluid time, and we are really kind of rolling with the punches as to when the FBI begins its news conference. We will take you there live. And Bonnie Barron's had a chance to get some more details on this afternoon's events. Bonnie?
We have a couple of other updates to tell you about. Florida Governor Jeb Bush has declared a state of emergency. Also, Maryland has declared a state of emergency. As Sue just mentioned, Fidel Castro, Cuban president, will be making a statement at 6 p.m. expected to comment on today's events in the United States. And President Bush has now, it's reported to be, he has gone underground into the bunkers at Stratcom, the underground bunkers at Stratcom on Offutt Air Force Base near Omaha, Nebraska, where it is basically a command and control center in case of an attack on the United States. Sue and Bill, back to you.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. We're also getting word that the Cuban Foreign Ministry has issued a statement offering its condolences and also medical and humanitarian aid to the United States. And of course, the Pentagon is also going to be holding a briefing shortly as well. And Hampton Pearson is in Washington. He's been following the situation there at the Pentagon, which of course also was hit by a terrorist attack earlier this morning. Hampton, what's the latest?
Regarding the situation at the Pentagon, the last official we heard a short while ago was from Admiral Craig Quigley, who talked about the fact that indeed confirming what we all knew, but making it, as I say, official, that yes, in fact, acknowledged it was a plane that in fact hit a portion of the Pentagon. Much of the efforts, as you might expect, devoted to fighting the fire and getting the injured to the hospital. We have had no updated statistics, if you will, on either fatalities or injuries. The most current numbers we have specifically regarding the Pentagon, 26 basically injured folks being treated at hospitals in Northern Virginia. Also here in the nation's capital, both Virginia's Governor Jim Gilmore and Anthony Williams, the mayor of the District of Columbia, have in fact declared states of emergency. I can tell you, having stepped outside a short while ago, what began this morning as utter chaos, gridlock in terms of traffic and everything else. Now the nation's capital is very much like you would find it on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, basically a semi-ghost town. All major federal buildings, in fact, have been closed. People sit home. Much of the congressional leadership is not at the Capitol. One of the many buildings closed. The White House shut down. Treasury, State, you name it. It's a whole different scene here. Of course, as you just mentioned, President Bush left Florida this morning, has not returned to the nation's capital, stopping briefly in Louisiana for a statement, then moving on, as you mentioned, to that very secure facility outside Omaha, Nebraska. It's basically a very deep, isolated underground bunker type arrangement there. But at the same time, the president saying a short while ago, making his second statement of the day, that in his view, freedom itself was attacked this morning, but make no mistake about it, the U.S. will find and punish those responsible for what he called these cowardly acts. Now, we also had words earlier today from the Federal Reserve that it, in fact, has been open for business as usual, if you will, available to, among other things, provide liquidity not only now, but in the days to weeks to come as we more fully assess the total impact of all of this. You're looking right now at some earlier pictures in and around the Pentagon of the devastation and the aftermath there. Also, Harvey Pitt, the new head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, basically concurring with that decision to close financial markets for today at least. And of course, that situation is, as you mentioned, will be reassessed, and we'll get more word on that as of 6 o'clock this evening. So it's a very eerie day here in the nation's capital, as it is, of course, in the New York area where you are. Also, by the way, the FAA, for the first time ever in the nation's history, basically totally suspending air traffic in the U.S. Another of the major aftermaths of this incredible terrorist tragedy, a tragedy that Senator Chuck Hagel of Nebraska is calling this generation's Pearl Harbor. Back to you.
Hampton, thanks very much. And along those lines, American Airlines is echoing what the FAA said, that they have now accounted for all of the jets that were in the air at the time of the attacks. They are all now safely on the ground. Sue?
All right, Kathleen Tansey joins us now as we continue to take a look not only at the devastation domestically, but also overseas. And Kathleen is taking a look at the Latin American market's reaction to the devastation here in the U.S. and the lack of trading as well. Kathleen?
I do want to get to that, but just here as you were coming to me, there was an announcement coming into the building about some limited service available now to people that want transportation around New York City. You know, it had come to a virtual stall. There is no downtown subways working, but we've now been told that there are subways now operational to Uptown and Queens on the 1, 2, 4, and 6, and that the railroad systems limited service on the Long Island Railroad, Metro North, and New Jersey Transit. Most of that, of course, going outbound. Grand Central is open. Penn Station is open. The Midtown Tunnel is open to outgoing traffic. So I just wanted to give you that update since there's been a lot of freeze on the transportation in this city. Let's talk now about people now, even amidst this tragedy, saying, gee, are U.S. assets now a liability? to global portfolio owners. And what we find is that people are looking back to history. Pearl Harbor, December 7, which was on a Sunday. The New York Stock Exchange fell 5% over the next 2 days. And so what we saw in Latin America today, those markets were open for the couple hours of trading before they were halted. The Latin stock markets dropped 5 to 10% and then closed again just after a couple hours of trading. Brazil's market closed at a 23-month low. The Mexican peso and the Brazilian real were pressured in general about 2% because of dollar selling, and most of the currencies in Latin America are linked heavily to the dollar, and the real sank to its lowest level since its birth of 1994. The Latin bond markets were down about 3% on average. They are a very volatile market, but they were down because of concern about the U.S. bond market. Treasury auctions across Latin America were halted today due to uncertainty about the U.S. Treasuries and how they would move. A normal volatility move in a Latin American bond market is closer to 1%, so this is about 3 times worse than regular volatility. The investment flows, I'm told, just so you know, I talked to stock markets, the heads of bourses, I talked to finance ministries and equity strategists. They said the investment flows have gone to gold, oil, grains, and the Swiss franc. They say the mood for the stock market open, whenever it is, will be negative and will continue to be negative until the U.S. response to terrorism is more clear. And I can have more on the financial market updates from the Latin ministries a little bit later. Back to you.
All right, Kathleen, thank you very much. Kathleen Tanzi there at Instinet. Tom Costello normally is at the NASDAQ market site. He's on the phone right now with a contribution right now on the... What do you have, Tom?
Well, first of all, let me explain to you that we were all evacuated from the NASDAQ market site very soon after the second plane attack, and it took me about 5.5 hours to get back over to the New Jersey side. What I did want to contribute here is, ironically enough, my mother-in-law was today on a flight from Brussels bound for the United States. All of those international flights, or a good chunk of them anyway, from Europe were diverted to Canada. In the case of my mother-in-law, she is now sitting on a tarmac in St. John's, Newfoundland, and she tells us that there are roughly 14 or 15 other American carriers on the same tarmac, and they have been surrounded by the Canadian military. One presumes that, of course, their concern is nobody knows whether there might not be another alleged terrorist on one of those flights, but they're taking no precautions. They are apparently being told that they are going to be put up in a tent city of sorts in St. John's, Newfoundland. Of course, it gets a lot colder up there this time of the year, but that's the concern. And she tells us, don't worry, right now I'm sitting on the plane with a glass of water, but we're also understanding that no planes will be allowed into the United States for at least another 24 hours or so.
Tom, that's good to hear. Always good to hear any happy news at that point.
She
Thanks.
might need something a little stronger than a glass of water, however, by
I
the time all of
mentioned
this is over.
I mentioned earlier that American Airlines had announced that it had accounted for all of the jets that were in the air at the time of the attacks earlier today. They're also saying they have now canceled all flights until at least noon tomorrow.
Right.
And that, of course, could change as time warrants.
We're going to go back across to Leslie LaRoche, who is in London and has been following the rather vehement reaction to the downside that some of the European markets have had to the situation here in the U.S. Leslie, what's the latest over there tonight?
Thank you very much. So, yeah, these markets stayed open through this disaster, and we saw some very, very sharp selling across the region. We have the FTSE closing down 5.7%, basically nearly $100 billion were wiped off of the FTSE today. It was the biggest one-day closing point loss since the crash of October 1987. We had stunned investors selling shares basically in a panic mode. We did try to talk to some traders here. Many of them said they could not talk. They were not allowed to speak to the press because they did not know if their colleagues in the U.S. were safe and sound. I mean, for example, Credit Suisse has offices in the World Trade Center. Commerce Bank and the big German bank, Deutsche Bank, have offices in the World Trade Center. So they can't talk to us today. In the other markets, the DAX, there was a bomb threat that closed and evacuated the Deutsche Börse late in the afternoon. That turned out to be a hoax, but during the trading session, the DAX was down in crash territory. It was down 11%. It finished out the day down 8.5% lower, down 400 points. This is the biggest one-day loss over on the DAX. Basically, it was the insurers that bore the brunt of the selling. Not surprising. These are worries about claims to come. We had Swiss Re, the reinsurer, down 17%. Allianz down 14%. We also had a substantial amount of selling in the air carriers, and this is because of the perception of the fears of flight safety. So we had the likes of British Airways down 12 and 13% on the day. Now, in terms of what's to come tomorrow, the London Stock Exchange, as we know now, that this could change, but that the FTSE is expected to open for business. We don't yet know the Euronext, a combination of the Paris, Brussels, and Amsterdam bourses. We don't know if they will open. The DAX is considering whether to open. Some of your earlier reporters were talking about where did the money go. There's been a real flight to safety out of the U.S. dollar. We've seen the dollar plunging 2% against the euro today. The Swissy gaining on that, and we do know that the ECB is ready to provide liquidity, and we do understand that Alan Greenspan is still in Switzerland. We'll leave it there for now. We'll talk to you in a while. Soon, Bill, back.
And actually, Leslie, the U.S. Fed here has said it is ready to provide any liquidity that is needed, and all of the Fed presidents around the country have repeated that same statement. Leslie LaRoche, thank you so much, Leslie.
Various lawmakers have been weighing in today with their response. Senator Joseph Biden of Delaware is the latest. He says, among other things, he just is champing at the bit to get the Senate back into session. He said at a news conference, in his words, the first thing that we should do is be visible. He said there's no need to close schools. He said, while this will be remembered as a day of infamy, the terrorists win when we do anything to change our way of life. Biden and some others said they hope the Congress can go back into session tomorrow. Consuelo Mack, more on the price of oil, which often will move at times like this, and indeed it has today.
And it sure did today, as we just heard from Leslie, Bill, that the price of oil, Brent crude in London, soared today, as did oil stocks in London as well. And joining us is Tom Petrie. He is president and partner of Petrie Partman in Denver. It's an energy research firm. And Tom, I know you were evacuated from your offices earlier in Denver, but the price of oil did surge. What are the implications of this terrorist attack on the markets, and specifically the energy markets?
Hello, Consuelo. Well, it really is a situation where it's very early to make judgments, but it was referred earlier today as a second Pearl Harbor, and clearly, just as Pearl Harbor was an end of innocence for the U.S. at that time and brought us into World War II, I believe this is an end of innocence with respect to the terrorist threat coming to the continental United States. In that respect, it's a powerful blow to American consumer psyche, and as a result, I think it's very important that OPEC said today that they would continue to supply oil to meet the world's needs. And I think once we get behind us somewhat the tragedy of today's events, then with the recognition is going to be that the challenge for OPEC and perhaps others will be really defending a lower oil price as opposed to worrying about $40 oil. We may be worrying about whether oil goes below 20 and because of the lack of demand. You know, it's an extreme example, but airplanes weren't flying today, and that's just one example of the lack of consumption that comes when the consumer pulls in its horns.
You know, Tom, do you think
as I say, go ahead.
Do you think this is going to have a lasting impact then on consumer psychology and therefore basically on the economy, that in fact it could cause the economy to slow down even more than it has both here and possibly globally?
Nothing's certain at this point, but that's certainly a possibility that I'm worried about. Joe Biden spoke a few minutes ago about the importance of being able to continue as much as possible business as usual, but it will be unrealistic in my mind to expect all business to continue as usual. And I do believe that this will be a blow that does have an impact on lifestyles and consumer patterns.
You know, Tom, this is speculation. It's only speculation. Names that have been mentioned, we had a political risk specialist on earlier, Omar bin Laden for one, Iraq for another, that, you know, among the groups or individuals that could pull off an attack of this scope. What kind of a message does this send to Middle East producers as well?
Well, it's certainly a chilling message to everybody in the world who believes in a degree of order and civility. And so, you know, there are those implications. Traditionally, we've always thought of terrorism is linked to cutoff of oil supplies, interruption, and therefore oil spikes. And certainly there'll be some of that, and that was, in my opinion, the reason you saw the spike in oil prices in trading today. But as I say, I really think when we reflect on what may come down the road, more of the forces are going to argue against demand growth and maybe even some demand shrinkage, and therefore deflation, the deflationary forces that were already in place being reinforced by this event.
Tom Petrie, thanks for joining us from Petrie Parkman out of Denver. Thanks, Tom. And Sue and Bill, back to you.
Consuelo, thank you very much. We are about 30 seconds away from a Pentagon press briefing. Admiral Quigley, the press spokesman there, will be conducting this news conference to let reporters know the status of not only the situation there at the Pentagon, where there was attack, as well as at the World Trade Center, but perhaps about anti-terrorist alert and the status of the U.S. Army, which we already know has been put on heightened alert as well. And of course, it's no surprise that it's outdoors that they're holding this news conference here.
Yes, and also we are awaiting the FBI's news conference. Sometimes they coordinate these events so that they do not overlap, particularly in this particular situation where so much news has occurred today. Obviously, we will be hearing from Admiral Craig Quigley in just a short while. Then we'll be going to the FBI news presser in just a short while as well. And Maria Bartiromo and Bob Pisani are both on Wall Street, in different locations on Wall Street. Bob Pisani was right at the World Trade Center just a short while ago, but Maria Bartiromo has been down at the NYSE. And Maria, I understand they've moved people into the new trading area of the NYSE, those who are left on Wall Street, correct?
That's right, Sue. Right now I'm on the floor, but I walked out a few minutes ago. And the truth is I actually am having a hard time breathing regularly after having been outside for the last 15 minutes. I've been wearing one of these respirator caps, as are everyone who is actually outside. And there aren't many people outside. The streets are empty except for police officers and FBI agents. The dust on the floor is about this high. It is incredibly thick. I've been told by sources down here that it's unlikely that we will see trading resume tomorrow. As you know, at 6 p.m., the New York Stock Exchange and Dick Grasso will be hosting a call to discuss the possibility of trading tomorrow. One source that I spoke with earlier speculated to me that even if we were to see trading, we probably would only see it in partial groups, maybe the S&P 500, but he said that was
Biden a bit earlier today saying he would like to see the Senate and Congress get back into session and deal with this. How is the Hill going to come together, if you will, over this disaster?
Well, number one, we did have the unprecedented statement very early on today from Senator Tom Daschle and Trent Lott, basically condemning the apparent act of terrorism and fully supporting the Commander-in-Chief, George W. Bush. Be that as it may, though, you are getting a cross-section of reaction from members of Congress. One school of thought to sort of hunker down and take a step back. The other, as evidenced by Senator Joe Biden and his comments, that any sort of giving in to terrorism in terms of disruptions of our way of life beyond the obvious security precautions would be just that. So let's raise the profile. Sue, one other thing, too, I want to take the time to do is try and make some sense, if you will, of the fragments of that Pentagon briefing you were hearing just a while ago. You heard, for instance, one of the officials talk about that, quote, this plane that apparently struck the Pentagon, quote, penetrated at least 3 rings. That's significant because the Pentagon, basically, in addition to being a 5-sided structure, has 5 rings from A to E, inside out, if you will. So that gives you some sense of really the force of the plane striking the Pentagon. Also, it happened in an area that had been newly renovated, as well as a portion of the existing building. So that's why, for instance, trying to get accurate figures on injuries and casualties is going to be a bit of a problem. You also heard Pentagon officials say they can't account for the safety and the whereabouts of basically the major members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and obviously Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. So as I was listening, as you and our viewers, to that, I thought maybe one of the things I could do is try and make some sense out of a very fragmented briefing that, obviously we had to join in progress. Back to you.
And we appreciate it, Hampton, because those of us who are not familiar with the Pentagon were somewhat confused by their reference to the three rings. It's good to know exactly what they were talking about.
Our coverage continues now here on CNBC with Tyler Matheson and Liz Klayman.
This is a CNBC special report. Attack on America.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is CNBC special coverage of the attack on America. I'm Tyler Matheson.
And I'm Liz Klayman. We are now nearly 7.5 hours past what appears to be the worst terrorist attack in the history of the United States.
And now just to clarify and recap what began a day of almost unspeakable shock and horror across the entire United States.
It began in Lower Manhattan in the financial district of New York City at 8:42 a.m. Eastern Time. This is at a time when thousands of people were heading to work downtown. A plane heading from Boston to L.A. was hijacked and flown directly into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. You see that on your screen, causing a massive explosion and subsequent fire that drew hundreds of firefighters and rescuers, police officers to the scene to try and evacuate that 110-story building.
And then a mere 21 minutes later, 9:03 a.m. Eastern Time, a second hijacked jetliner draws a terrifying bead. There you see it. It hits the South Tower of the Trade Center. Flight caught live on camera by crews covering the first attack. The impact, ferocious projectile exit wound of fire and smoke.
Then, at approximately 9:40 a.m. in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., a third hijacked plane crashes into the Pentagon in a burst of flames. One side of the Pentagon, that's the world's largest office building, collapses as hundreds flee that structure.
And then a half hour later, approximately 9:59 a.m., the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapses in an explosion of concrete, steel, glass, and humanity. 110 stories fall as one. The building, weakened by the impact of that first jet, can no longer support its weight.
So as people are rushing there to try and help those who are trying to escape, rescuers attempting to save those trapped in the second tower, it too collapses just a half hour later in a rain of concrete and steel spreading for blocks, showering down debris on the streets of Lower Manhattan below. The entire tip of Lower Manhattan engulfed in smoke and dust, all buildings obscured by the disaster. We're talking about a total of 425,000 cubic yards of concrete, 200,000 tons of steel, 43,000 windows totaling 600,000 square feet of glass. You can only imagine all of the people who are down below either trying to flee the area anyway, escape, or at least the rescuers trying to help those who were trying to leave. We must also mention that in a separate but apparently related crash, a fourth hijacked plane, a Boeing 757, crashed in western Pennsylvania this morning just southeast of Pittsburgh. In just the airplane crashes alone, the dead total 266. Michelle Caruso-Cabrera has been following the events of the day. Also, of course, as we are a financial network here, the impact on financial markets. She joins us with the latest. Michelle.
Thank you, Liz. As a result of the terrorist attack on America today, the SEC halted all trading in U.S. markets. International markets plunged while oil, gold, and bonds soared. It is unlikely the U.S. markets will reopen tomorrow. There will be a conference call 2 hours from now to decide just that. Part of the issue, the lack of infrastructure resulting from the bombing. Morgan Stanley Dean Witter had a very large office in the towers at the World Trade Center. Cantor and Fitzgerald's headquarters are at the top of the North Tower. Oppenheimer Funds had 5 floors in the South Tower. Across the street at the World Trade Center was the New York Mercantile Exchange, where oil, gold, and futures contracts are traded. Very unlikely they can return there tomorrow as well. Bank of America, Deutsche Bank also have offices in that area. Keefe, Bruyette & Woods, a small firm which covers the financial industry, also has offices in the towers. International markets plunged in the wake of the news. Frankfurt's DAX 30 dropped 9%, its biggest one-day drop ever. The Paris CAC fell 7.4%, London's FTSE 5.7%, Stockholm's market plunging 7.5%, and in Amsterdam the AEX fell 7%, Milan's MIB 30 dropped 7.8%, and the Toronto Stock Exchange plunged 4% before trading was halted. Brent crude, however, surged today more than $3 to $30.65 a barrel. That is a 12% gain. The fear is that hostilities resulting from this terrorist attack will curtail the supply of oil. Spot gold climbed to $290 an ounce. Unlike a futures contract, spot gold is for delivery right now. People chasing the hard commodity to have it on hand because it is seen as stable in times of chaos. Also in the search for safety, Treasury surged, especially short-term notes. And there are expectations for a massive short covering rally in the natural gas market once that reopens here. Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan is in Switzerland for a meeting there. He tried to come back when news of the attack broke, but his plane was turned back as part of the lockdown on U.S. airports. His whereabouts are being kept secret. The Federal Reserve said it is ready to provide liquidity to the nation's banks if needed. And we will keep you up to date on any overseas trading. The bond continues to trade overseas, as do a number of commodities. That's it from here. That's today's play-by-play. Back to you, Tyler and Liz.
Michelle, thank you very much. Maria Bartiromo was right in the area of the World Trade Center during those attacks this morning at her normal place in the New York Stock Exchange. She was covered in debris and ran for cover along with other folks. She is now safely at the New York Stock Exchange, where she has spent the afternoon reporting for us. Maria, describe the physical and emotional sensations, what you saw, what you felt, and the reaction at the exchange. We don't have Maria Bartiromo, I'm sorry to say.
Well, of course, the big aspect here politically is that President Bush is very much involved. He's watching this very closely. He was about to participate in an event in Sarasota, Florida, when that first attack occurred this morning. He made a brief statement in Florida. Then he headed right to an Air Force base in Louisiana and has now, Hampton Pearson, I understand, moved to a Strategic Air Command in Omaha, Nebraska. Hampton is standing by in Washington, D.C. with more on that. Hampton.
Liz, right you are. The president is basically in a very secure location outside the Omaha, Nebraska area. We just got a briefing and a brief statement moments ago from here in Washington from Karen Hughes, a top White House advisor, that pretty much cataloged the outline of responses from the president, his top national security advisors, in steps being taken in reaction to this apparent unprecedented terrorist attack in both the New York City area and, of course, here to Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon. She basically cataloged, among other things, that U.S. forces and embassies around the world are on the highest state of alert. The president, the vice president, the Speaker of the House have all been moved to or are in very safe and secure locations. The national security team is meeting with the president at this hour, the meeting being conducted by the president from that secure location outside the Omaha, Nebraska area. There have been obviously a number of actions taken by the government that impact basically all facets of life as we know it here today. All airports closed nationwide by the FAA for the first time, an unprecedented move. International flights outside the U.S. Basically, or headed to the U.S. have been diverted outside U.S. borders, most notably to Canada. And we are also being told by the FAA that at this point in time it appears that there will be no domestic flights at least until noon tomorrow at the earliest. Also, it was pointed out that, yes, while the financial markets, in fact, were closed today, the banks never closed, and the Federal Reserve system was up and fully functioning, as has been mentioned elsewhere, providing liquidity not only today, but in the days and weeks to come in the aftermath of this incredible tragedy. Back to you.
All right, thank you very much. Hampton Pearson in Washington reporting for us from the nation's capital right now. We're just seeing a flash at the U.S. Treasury Department says it has now canceled its Wednesday four-week bill auction with no plans to reschedule that. So clearly the financial reverberations continuing to be felt as a result of this. And nowhere were the reverberations more intimately felt than down at the New York Stock Exchange in the financial district of Manhattan today. Bob Pisani has been there all day and has just returned from the streets of Lower Manhattan. What can you tell us, Bob?
Well, I was, Tyler, on the site of the South Tower, what was the South Tower of the World Trade Center. About an hour and a half ago, went there and went in with the first wave of emergency people and fire people who were actually allowed to start climbing what is left of the building. There is a gigantic, as you can imagine, 30-foot-high pile of twisted steel and rubble that the EMS people were beginning to climb onto, along with the fire people, looking for any signs of life. I did see them take what appeared to be a body out, and again, they are simply there looking all over for any signs of life, although, as you can imagine, at this point, just wading through the rubble of the street that I was on, which I come up every morning, Liberty Street, which is next to the World Trade Center, was been virtually obliterated. It is just piles and piles of rubble at this point. There are probably several hundred firefighters and EMS people that are on the site right now. Many of them just, frankly, like me, staring at it, never seeing anything like it, and hopefully never seeing anything again. They are now beginning to cordon off the area. To my knowledge, I was the only reporter that was on the scene, or at least that was standing on the site. They asked me to leave a short while ago, and now the place is being flooded with firemen. But I want to point out that for the longest time, it appears the fire department didn't feel it was safe for people to go into the area, even for the emergency teams to go into the area. And it's only been in the last hour and a half or so that people have actually started climbing around on top of the rubble. So a lot of people, even I talked to some experienced people who've seen many fires and many serious disasters, some of them just staring themselves in shock at the twisted piles of steel that are there. Tyler?
Well, Bob, I just want to ask one question, then I know Liz has one. Did you see whether there were any fires still burning?
Oh yes. When I was there, and unfortunately I don't know the number of the building, but the building immediately next to the World Trade Center building, there was still a building that was on fire, and there were a lower part of some rubble pieces that was on fire and was continuing to burn, quite notably. There is also a building, and I'm sorry, Tyler, I don't know the number of the building, that is directly to the south of the South Tower of the World Trade Center that was very seriously damaged, and that the fire department and the emergency people have simply been frankly staring at, trying to figure out what to do with it, appears, but there may be some question about its stability. I couldn't get any definitive answer from anybody down there. As you can imagine, it's rather chaotic right now. And again, they are just on the scene now in the last hour and a half, really beginning to comb through the rubble.
Bob, we are just getting a word over the wires at Morgan Stanley, which of course is the largest tenant of the World Trade Centers. They had something like 50 floors dedicated to their trading and to their employees, is coming out with a memo that of course says that the Trade Center personnel had survived Tuesday's morning's attack and apparently were all right. This from Phil Purcell, the CEO, and he's saying that some of the employees have survived. The investment firm senior management is reporting that they expect operations up and functioning tomorrow. Their clients should not worry that their records are safe. More importantly, of course, is the human toll. 3,500 employees work there. Who else is in there? We've got Cantor Fitzgerald. We had Commerzbank, Deutsche Bank, some other big names.
There are. Liz, in the immediate area around the World Trade Center, there are virtually dozens of brokerage houses, as well as the NYMEX itself, which is directly across the street itself. And I was not allowed to cross over the West Side Highway to where the headquarters of Merrill Lynch, American Express, the NYMEX, the exchange that is over on the other side of the West Side Highway. But they are adjacent to each other. There is the World Trade Center, the West Side Highway, which is 6 lanes, I believe, and then the World Financial Center, which houses Merrill Lynch and American Express's headquarters, as well as the NYMEX. I was not allowed to actually get through it. It's just a twisted pile of rubble at this point, and I'm not sure of the damage. But I can tell you on the south side, where there are office buildings and brokerage firms situated there was serious damage to the buildings that were directly adjacent to the World Trade Center. So it wasn't just those that were damaged. All in the immediate area next to it has been serious damage.
All right, Bob Bassani, thank you very much for that report, and I'm sure we'll be checking back with you repeatedly this evening. Well, London continued trading during the attacks today. The stock markets there crumbled, however, because of what happened in New York City this morning. Leslie Roche is standing by in London now, where it is, about 8 o'clock in the evening. Leslie?
It is 8 o'clock local time here in London, Tyler. We did have the bourses, the major markets across Europe stayed open through this tragedy, and we saw sharp waves of selling, not surprisingly. We did have the FTSE closing down 5.7% lower, its biggest point loss since the October 87 crash. A massive $98 billion wiped off of this market cap today. Only 3 stocks climbed. Those are BP, Shell, and Defense System BAE. Over in Frankfurt, there was a bomb scare at the Deutsche Börse. It was evacuated. We did have the DAX, though, trade through that problem. It turned out to be a hoax, but the DAX lost a massive 396 points today. Really, the brunt of the selling was seen in the insurance sector. That's in anticipation of the claims to come. We also have British Airways down 21% today, a sample of some of the fears, the flying fears that we can expect in the flying public. I also want to tell you a little bit about what's happening in sort of a general and the political scope here in Europe. All of the streets around U.S. embassies in Europe are being closed. All of the Frankfurt skyscrapers were evacuated earlier today. There are recommendations that those stay closed through tomorrow. Tony Blair, Prime Minister, coming out today saying that London is on high alert. The airport's increased security. There's a bit of a no-fly zone over London. That has been widened. There will be no private or civil aircrafts allowed over London. Financial institutions have been advised of security measures, and I think, and probably what sums it up best, is we had word that Queen Elizabeth is watching developments in growing disbelief and total shock. Leave it there for now. We'll bring you an update later. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Leslie LaRoche. Of course, as we mentioned, you know, the human toll is the most important thing, and Rudy Giuliani has been, the mayor of New York, has been coming out with some numbers about 1,500 people wounded at Liberty Park, and of course, hundreds and hundreds have been sent to area hospitals. We just wanted to mention that, and as the numbers come in, we'll bring them to you. In the meantime, we want to just shift a little bit to the markets here. Darby Mullaney has been in Midtown Manhattan at our bureau there. Darby, the conference call 6 p.m. with markets and regulators to decide what will happen tomorrow, although we're hearing reports that most likely trading will not resume, at least at the New York Stock Exchange.
Indeed. We're still waiting to hear official word as to when exactly the markets will reopen and if it will happen tomorrow. A conference call is scheduled for 6 p.m. Eastern time tonight. We should get some kind of indication then. The Securities and Exchange Commission ordered the markets closed for today, and as we were talking about earlier, several top financial firms have offices in what was the Twin Tower complex. Morgan Stanley, perhaps the biggest tenant. A spokesperson at Morgan Stanley earlier today told us that as opposed to what the wires are saying, that they had 50 floors in the complex, that they actually had 22 floors in number 2 World Trade Center and 3 floors in another building in the complex, number 5 World Trade Center. You all were reading a press release from Morgan Stanley that just came out earlier saying that they'll be back in business tomorrow, and that many of the staff members, if not all of them, survived, if I heard you correctly. We were told that they would issue a press release at 5 o'clock Eastern time. In any case, we're following up on that. Mary Thompson will have more on that later. The other firms in the Twin Towers include Credit Suisse Group, Germany's Commerzbank, Deutsche Bank, Thomson Financial, and Cantor Fitzgerald. I put in a call to Cantor Fitzgerald to the Connecticut office to see if we could get any information from there. My source there was not available, and the person who answered the phone said that Cantor Fitzgerald was not going to be issuing any comments right now. And I would have to say that the person on the phone did seem understandably very upset. So we're awaiting word from them to see.